Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very accomplished entrepreneur, Shakun Sethi from Mumbai, India. Shakun, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Ashutosh. I'm honored to be here, and I'm really looking forward to our discussion
Thank
today.
you. Shakun is the founder and CEO of Tickle.Life. So, Shakun, very interesting name, Tickle.Life. Tell me about this venture and your motivation to start this venture.
See, Ashutosh, the thing is, whenever we look at things around us, we always would want to know, how this thing happens, does that thing happen? And the ultimate thing that we end up doing is we end up going, you're going and you're just Googling it. But then when I got curious about sexuality, I just could not find the right information. And when you talk to people, the only platform that they can ask and they can tell you about is porn. So my brain, because, this is not my first rodeo, this is my second startup. My brain was, why are we not able to discover?
Correct.
What is the problem? Is it just because it's such a big taboo that people do not want to talk about it? Or is it that, people don't know about it? But how's that possible? Because there was something like a Kama Sutra was made. I was in Europe, so there are so many sex toy shops where they assume that you would know at least something. So what's up? So ultimately, it ended up with, there's a big problem of discoverability. But why is it so? And that was the reason why I said, okay, what I'm going to do is let me take 2 years to figure out why discoverability is an issue. Because if you do not discover, you do not find. When you do not find, then you just are dependent on whatever information you can, garner. And that actually leads to the biggest reason of why sexuality is such a big taboo. So let's do that. And that was the reason why Tickle.Life was born. And if you know, it's Tickle.Life. Because if you're not going to tickle your life, you're just going to be like, what? I'm going to go to office. I'm going to come back. I'm going to be frustrated. I just don't know. And quite frankly, initially, I did not even know what the discoverability issue is. So just wanted to keep a very blanket name, which was still fun because I like fun stuff.
Fantastic. And Shakun, given the fact that we are sitting in India, which, I've often said as the biggest country in the world, and yet we are also the most prudish country in the world. What have been some of your challenges and learnings as you have built Tickle.Life?
Okay, so one thing, yesterday somebody asked me this question, why Tickle.Life's first market is North America? Or what made you take that call? And my answer was that when I started and when I wanted to talk to people, I just could not find people. Because if you do not have people, how are you going to find? I don't know anything. I'm not a sexologist. I'm not a gynecologist. I'm nobody in the profession of sexuality. So, that's actually one of the biggest red flag or the roadblock, which even she could resonate with, because she's also creating a platform in this industry, that the ecosystem of people who are working in the sexuality sector is pretty fragmented. So for somebody who would have taken maybe like a month to meet the first right person, ends up taking a year or 2 years, or maybe sometimes, bigger. That's one. The second thing is, it's still the society. So when I talk about, my platform is into sexuality, the first thought that a lot of people get is, oh, are they going to be naked pictures? Or, is it going to be very explicit?
Correct.
And they do not understand that, we are encountering this problem for a different angle. We are saying there is a very big profession. There are a lot of professionals. There are educationists, there are academicians, but they are not getting the support which any other industry does from a technological point of view. And technology is the biggest roadblock
Correct.
but it's also the biggest support system that you need for anything right now. So that's where we are looking at, from. So it's very difficult to understand. But I do remember I've had, and I keep a count, I've had 235 rejections from hires, who wanted to work with us. So that has been a interesting roadblock. But things have changed now. Things are things are better. But I do know a lot of them do not even talk about it openly, like where they're working, who they're working with. So that's interesting. So the roadblock is very different. And I think it just happens with a lot of industries who are just starting or who are trying to make a difference, what it is. So, yeah.
Yeah. And given the kind of energy I'm seeing in my conversation with you, I think all these roadblocks will disappear very soon.
Inshallah.
But, Shakun, moving forward, what is the meaning of building a custom pleasure tech stack for the world?
Okay. So I've already given some hints about what we're building. So what happened in this journey of 2 years was we did anything and everything that you can think of. We did workshops. We right now have, when you're talking about your podcast, and I'm honored to be here, we have the largest streaming podcast network in the world for sexual positive podcasts. So anybody who has a podcast which they will cater to the sexuality industry, they will automatically find Tickle.Life and they will just, stream there as well. We have around 1,800 plus blog posts, which are all original. We have over 365 people writing on our platform. So while we were doing all of these things, we started encountering a lot of problems. Like, what are the basic things? The way we engage, we needed a newsletter or a email. Most of the newsletters would flag you if you use the term sex.
Correct.
So a lot of these people are not able to use it. Then the thing is, when you're looking out for platforms, most of the platforms, Zoom, Meet, they have the same issue, that you cannot use certain words. You need payments. Payments also would not give you a payment gateway because they will put you in high risk, even though you're not, because your health. So while all these problems were coming to us also, and I was short of money because we were bootstrapping, but I've been lucky to have a tech team internally, even though I'm not a techie, we were building things for ourselves. So newsletter, hey, we have to send a newsletter. We can't use MailChimp. What do? Let's create our own. We need to take out a podcast. We don't want a podcast to be lost. So what do? Let's create a hosting service and a streaming service so that at least we are safe. We want to do workshops. What do? We figure out solutions. We figure out open source components. So then it just hit me. And I took a 1 month break just to figure out what we are doing because my 2 years was up. And now is the time to actually have an idea and a plan that what really worked for Tickle.Life and what did not. We have never been banned anywhere. We've never been shadow banned, but we do see the difference in engagement, from the tech giant own platforms and our own platforms. And it just hit me that there are over, if I give you a very random number, there's an increase of 35% of our target audience year on year.
Wow.
So new educators are coming out, people are studying about sex and gender. This market is a $1 trillion market. And I'm not talking about adult sector. I'm not even talking about the product sector. I'm just talking about education. I'm just talking about, licensing. I'm talking about advocacy. But they all know what they do, but they do not know tech. But somehow we figured that out. So why not we create the custom tech stack, which all the other industries have? So if you're creating the custom tech stack, is it just for people who are working in sex? No, because when you talk to a mental health specialist, they end up telling you that 70 to 80% of the people who come to them for therapy have some, inbound sexuality-centric problem. And that could even be related to gender.
Wow.
So then the gamut becomes bigger. So it's about pleasure. It's about, me smiling when I'm looking at you. I do not have an anxiety attack. I can confidently say, you know what, I'm a woman, but maybe I'm not, So that's what we are creating. So as the first step, we are creating a no-code website with the plugins which they need to do their business.
Okay.
So like, even if I look at you, you're a kind of a content creator. So what do you need? You need a podcast listening. You need, your own website so that you can tell people where am I, and your data is yours. If suppose tomorrow you want to sell things about the brand called you need an e-commerce platform. You need video. You need your own marketing component. So that's what we are building as the first step. So it's just very simple. If you need to call me or if you need to call anybody from the tech team, that means we're not working right. So we have over 15 organizations in this sector who are actually hand-holding us to create the product.
Amazing. Amazing.
So that the catering audience can really, really, pay attention. It's not about me sitting in Bombay, sitting in India, sitting in US, in a room, working with a team. Let's create this. They need this, they need this. No.
Fascinating.
People who need should be able to do that.
Absolutely.
So that's what we're doing, but we do have a layer that we are also working on, which is the payments. Because the logic is great. Now they have their own data. They know that they would not be shadow banned and banned, but how is the money coming to them? Because if the money doesn't come to them, they can't survive. Nobody can.
Yeah.
So that's how we are actually taking inputs from the adult industry, which we want the people to know that we are not, into how they have been working. So we're working with few people to understand how we can incorporate payments for this industry so that they can just like make money, because, on an average, every single day, and I'm giving you a very small number of whatever we could find, 2 lakh people look out for something to do with sexuality.
Wow.
But they do not end up finding the right information. So imagine the kind of demand that is already there, and it is just going to grow. So this is what we call when we talk about pleasure tech stack.
Very interesting. You also, referred to a couple of times about sex education. Now, as one has grown over the years, one has seen, heard a lot of myths about sex education amongst Indians. And that's probably because we are deprived of a lot of the knowledge that should easily be available.
Yeah.
How are you handling a lot of these myths?
See, that's how it is clear, no? So what we are saying is there are people who know what they're talking about, who know right from wrong. So right now what happens is people who are putting in myths, they end up being showcased online because see, ultimately it's SEO game. So how we are trying to change is when we are working with bigger organizations, when we are working with colleges, when we are working with, like people who've been trying to make the change, working with them, supporting them so that they can be discovered. Because if they can be discovered, and if you as a user get 3 different resources to go for, one is from a doctor, one is from like random, unknown, anonymous source, and one is from an educator, the things change. Because everybody, when they look out for anything to do with sexuality, they are in need of something. And when you're in need of something, you do not go just for the first one and then you just close. You actually do your research. So we just want the discoverability to be eased out. For the discoverability, we are ready to make the entire infrastructure. So so I'm talking about maybe like next 15 years of plan. We need to have our infrastructure so that this can be resolved, so that the myths can be resolved. So that's what we think we are going to be taking care of.
Wonderful. My next question, Shakun, is that what is the difference that you see in sexual wellness globally as compared to India?
See, the biggest difference is globally, it's more evolved. But when I talk about evolve, I am talking more from, the awareness point of view. What are the deterrents? What are the roadblocks? because when they understand those, they can figure out solutions. India is still at a very, very nascent stage. There are few people who are doing amazingly well, but the problem is just that, like a lot of them are just fragmented, which I've also seen globally. But because of COVID, they started coming in together. But still, like the fragmentation is the educators do not know the therapists. The therapists would not know the sex tech companies. The sex tech companies might or might not work with, like toy maker companies. So what happens there is, everything is dependent on each other. So that thing goes off. Here, the thing is, we are still like struggling to figure out and to understand what is needed. And because our audience is also even more close than they would have been otherwise, like on a daily basis, I must be getting like at least 3 to 4 messages in my DM saying like, hey, you're doing amazing work, but you can't expect them to retweet your tweet, or to comment on your tweet, because you understand that, they're closeted.
Correct.
So that's a very big difference in both. And I think for Indians, the journey would be a little more difficult, because you also have to understand that a lot of us are not ready to spend the money to get this knowledge.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. And before I move further, Shakun, how do you define sexual wellness?
Okay. So see, there are different components. One is sex tech. Okay. So I'll start like from the basics. So sex tech is something where technology is used for anything to do with somebody's sexuality. So even a dating site, even Tinder is a sex tech platform, if I put it easily, because, ultimately, it's about your pleasure. It's about, you're meeting people. Even if you're making friends, friends are able to talk to each other. So sexual wellness in the traditional way is being said is something to do with what are the components to help you with your sexuality. So either they are toys, they could even be a part of femtech, which means menstruation products. They could be loops, So these are more to do with products as such. And then the overall structure is the sexual well-being industry, which is what we are catering to. So sexual well-being industry has sex tech, has the sexual wellness, which includes femtech again, but also has a big component of education, advocacy, therapy, coaching. So that's how, like different things work. Right. Some people use everywhere sex tech because, it's a very fine line, because even for doing all of these things, you end up using some tech, you end up at least sending an email or at least taking a number on the phone. So it's a very, very fine line, but still, that's the best way whenever I talk to somebody who doesn't know anything about the industry. And even for me to understand, that's how we categorize.
Very interesting. My next question to you is that, since you are living in India and you're handling a topic which for years has been considered a taboo, I wanted to get your perspective that are Indians beginning to experiment more with their sexual preferences?
Absolutely. And, most of the tier 2 to tier 3 cities are the one where the demand for toys is the maximum. For cheaper toys, obviously. Okay. Nobody's buying those branded toys.
Sure.
People are ready to experiment. And, the biggest difference or biggest validation that you will see it through Netflix, through any of the OTT channel, the kind of, content that has started coming out.
Correct.
And it happens whenever there's so much angst, you need an outlet. And when you try to find the outlet, that's when, a market grows. And in our industry, we say that, this is the only industry which has nothing to do with recession. It's a recession-proof industry.
Absolutely.
Which is true. And, recession is just not monetarily. Recession is also mentally. Recession is also, if I may, a person who's going through anxiety to mental health issues, or his work is really bad, the traffic jams, because look at how we live in India, and then if he or she or they are able to masturbate, and then when they see the difference, so then they do not understand what's happening. It's about the hormonal changes, but then they start, relating it to something else, because we're people. We might not understand the scientific component. So it's not going down, it's only going to grow up. There's no two-way opinion about it. It's just about the legalities. It's just about understanding. It's about, like, still we don't use, if you're talking about a toy and selling a toy, we still call it a masturbator. Instead of calling it a masturbator, we'll call it a massager.
I know.
So these things are going to happen, and they're going to keep on happening for a while. But actually, India it's funny, is in a better position as compared to US.
Okay.
Because US is going down with a lot of rules, with a lot of, like right wing, a lot of like, no, the Bible Belt is growing.
Yeah.
So we should be in a position to come at a base, like a similar place, but it's still going to take a lot of time, because we don't even have a proper education as such, to make a sexologist here.
Very interesting. Shakun, I have time for two more questions. My next question is on culture. And, we are such a diverse country. We have such different beliefs, not just across different states or different cities, but across age groups.
Yeah.
How does culture have or impact discussions on sexual topics?
See, ultimately, the demand is same, the need is same, and people find solutions, and people find the answers. That doesn't change. So what happens is, like when you're looking at it, and when you're looking at culture, and what are the information, what are the requirements that are available. So there is no question about, what we're talking about. Globally, it's same. It doesn't change. But the only problem is, like, when you're looking out for it, what are the kind of resources you have to look out for? So, like, I was talking to somebody, do you remember, like, long back, there used to be those calling centers, where people used to call. So I had a chat with somebody a year back, and he used to do it in 60s and 70s.
Okay.
So, like, even when I wasn't even born, but I was really curious to understand. And he said something very interesting. He said, like, we had to pay all the call center, it's a call center, employees, women especially, more money if they would take calls from India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, as compared to other. And the reason was very interesting, because what he said was the frustration level is so high here, and there is no outlet. So when there is no outlet, then you become more aggressive. Then you just want to, like, say.
Yep.
So then the women want to charge more for the service. Amazing. For this industry.
Good for them.
Yeah, absolutely. But obviously, now it's like an old story, and it doesn't happen. But culturally, it's just that, because we are not able to talk about it too much. And if we talk about it, things will be different. And that's why, still India is one of the biggest porn consumer in the world.
I agree.
Yeah.
Well said. Yeah. And my last question, you, Shakun, and this is, based on the amazing journey you have had in, talking about the whole subject of sex and getting a very, very deep understanding, what would you say are 3 lessons on this sensitive subject that you would want our viewers and listeners to take away?
Number 1, if you're an entrepreneur, and if you think that, you want to get into sexual well-being, think hard. Like, if the journey that I personally have gone through, and the journey which I think that other people go through, and whatever I get to know, if you're really thinking that it's going to be easy as other industry, it's not. Yeah. And so entrepreneurship is difficult. So if it is 100, this is at least 1,000.
Wow.
Yeah. So think about it. The second thing is, there's no harm in having needs.
In having, sorry?
Needs. So if you have needs, it's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
And, like, you are not unique. Yeah. Because a lot of time, we end up saying, like, maybe I am going through this, or maybe, like, I am to blame, but that's not how it is.
Yeah.
And the third thing is, things are evolving. Things are changing.
Yeah.
Right now things used to just happen in your own bedroom, but things are evolving and it's going to be very confusing. People are using different pronouns. People are saying that, hey, I don't resonate with the gender that I'm born with. You need to ask consent. Like, one of the biggest mistake that I did before we started was to ask which gender, which pronoun are you comfortable with? So things are changing and then you would have to change. Otherwise, we all are going to be frustrated, or we just need to be, resonate with what's happening, even if we do not believe in it. So these are the three things that, it's changing in a very interesting way. And we just have to keep our eyes and ears open. We just can't say that, there's a man, there's a woman, and then there are like few people who would not, the world is changing and we have to be ready for this change.
Very, very interesting. Shakun, on that note and your three amazing lessons, think before you want to enter the sector. There is absolutely no problem in having needs. You are not your needs, as you said. And things are constantly evolving in this massive sector, which people still hesitate to talk about. Thank you for talking to me about Tickle.Life. And thank you for taking the time and explaining to us so much about the topic of sex.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.